Hello and welcome to Deloitte's podcast series on insurance. We're going to be talking about health insurance today, and I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Amit Chhabra, who is actually a Deloitte alumni and currently works with PolicyBazaar. Amit heads the health and travel insurance business at PolicyBazaar. Amit, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Siddharth. Pleasure meeting you again. And Deloitte's very, very close to my heart. It was my first employer, in fact. So it's a pleasure to be here again.
Perfect. Amit, do you want to give us a quick introduction to what you do at PolicyBazaar, and then we can dive right in?
Sure. So I lead the health and travel insurance verticals at PolicyBazaar. Just for a perspective, PolicyBazaar is India's largest online aggregator / broker of all insurance products, health insurance, life insurance, and motor insurance, being the three large business lines.
Got it. So, Amit, let's talk a little more about health insurance. Obviously, we're hopefully out of the pandemic, at least the worst of it. But COVID fundamentally changed the health insurance industry. And we've seen a lot of evolution over the last 2 years, both from a demand standpoint, as well as how customers are researching and buying products. Would love to hear from you what you're seeing in the market.
If you look back in time, every industry has that one moment which just completely changes it, transforms it, and takes it to the next orbit. I think for health insurance, COVID has been that moment. What we have seen is historically, health insurance was a very push purchase. People didn't really want to go ahead and buy it till there was an absolute necessity, or there was some fear. Like, for example, they would see some friend or relative getting ill and a large bill came up. That's when they realized that, oops, I don't have health insurance. I think that has fundamentally changed now, and health insurance has now become a pull purchase where everybody is scared and everybody thinks that health insurance is a mandatory purchase. I think that's one big change that has happened. So just to give you a perspective, car insurance in India has always been a mandatory purchase. One simple reason, because if you don't have car insurance, you may get a ticket or a challan, in Indian terminology. So I think in that perspective, health insurance was always not really mandatory in the minds of the customers, but now that's started to change. The reason it's changing is because COVID can happen to anybody or everybody. Anybody, however healthy you might be, you may get hospitalized. You may end up spending tens of lakhs of rupees in a hospital bill. And that's where you don't have that kind of savings, right? Most people don't have that kind of savings. That is where health insurance becomes very, very mandatory. And that's what customers have now started to realize. So that's why we are seeing, demand increasing manifold in the last couple of years. And more people are now either getting their first health insurance policies, or they're upgrading their health insurance policies into more comprehensive ones. In terms of, I think, the other point that you mentioned, in terms of buying health insurance, I think researching online has become more and more mainstream. So what we're now seeing is, through our surveys and customer studies, what we're now seeing is more than half of the customers who are buying health insurance in the industry, they are researching online before they buy. I think one fundamental reason is, historically, again, a lot of people used to depend on their agents or advisors to just buy whatever health insurance plan they suggested. Now that's started to change, because people now realize that if you're buying a health insurance policy, you need to know what it is. Is it sufficient enough? Is it, does it meet your purposes? Does it meet your objectives of coverage? So that's where I think it's become a very involved purchase for customers, and that's where people are now coming online and buying health insurance. So I think that's one big change. The other big change is, I think there's a lot of views that now customers take on what kind of health insurance I want to buy. Earlier, people used to take the plain vanilla health insurance, take a 3 lakh cover, basic cover, which, just provides you basic hospitalization. That's now started to change, because people now take a view on what kind of health insurance I want. Like, for example, do I want a luxury cover, which can give me a suite room as well? So people do take, those kind of plans. If, let's say, I want a cover which also covers for OPD expenses or maternity expenses, or so on and so forth, specific needs for specific kinds of customers. That's also a view that a lot of people take now. So again, people are now researching more before they buy their health insurance policy.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the industry has also done a phenomenal job of increasing transparency, demystifying products, so people actually better understand what they are buying into. Because traditionally, a lot of customers felt that the product they had acquired or purchased did not necessarily solve for the issues that they might end up running into. A lot of these customers, though, are now at the point of renewal. And so if you think about customers who are renewing, obviously portability has become is now allowed by the regulator. How should a customer rather think about insurance renewals, whether it's increasing the cover, whether it's thinking about add-ons, or it's about just choosing a different insurer if that's the case?
I think it's always a good idea for a customer to stick to the insurance company they are with. Unless there's a trigger. Now the trigger could be because of multiple reasons. The trigger could be because one, the price has increased dramatically, and as a result, you don't want to, you want to, move to a cheaper plan. That's one trigger, and that's very real also. We see price increases happening by a lot of companies over time, and that's why you might want to a cheaper plan. So that's one clear trigger. The other trigger that we see is, you want a specific feature in your policy and your current policy does not support it. Like, for example, you want a policy which allows you to take any room category at a hospital. Like, let's say you don't want to go to a single room, you want to go to a suite room or a deluxe room, but your current plan does not allow you that much. In fact, a lot of policies which were sold 2-3 years back, a lot of PSU policies, a lot of other, lower cost policies, they put a specific capping to the amount you can spend on a hospital room. Now imagine if somebody has a policy which says you can spend only 3,000 rupees per room per night. The problem is there are no good hospitals at that kind of, a price point. The average that we see is around 10,000 rupees. So in that case, that policy is not of much use for the customer. So again, that's another trigger where you realize that a feature or a limit in your policy is there which you want to get done with and you want to move to a better plan. That's another trigger that you would look at. The third trigger could be when you have not had a great claims experience with your current insurer. So let's say you've just had a claim and you weren't happy with the kind of claim settlement that was done or the processes that were followed, and you want to now you want to move the insurer to another, you want to move the plan to another insurer where the claim settlement policies are better. So that could also be a trigger. I think these are three triggers which we see the most, where a customer decides to move the health insurance to another insurer at the time of renewal.
Amit, how are you looking at consumers thinking about buying add-on plans? So they might have a corporate cover through their employer, but they're also looking at add-on plans. What's been the trend that you've seen around that? Is there a lot of that happening, and how are consumers looking at those additional coverages?
So Siddharth, historically, what used to happen was a lot of people didn't buy health insurance only because they thought that I have a corporate cover and I don't need another cover because the corporate cover is there. The problem with that is one, a lot of times, one, people move jobs and the new company may not have, a good enough cover. Secondly, the average cover on corporate policies is typically around 2.5 to 3 lakh rupees, which may not be sufficient, and specifically in the current times or as we go forward. That's a fairly small cover to depend on completely. Third challenge is one, whenever you retire or, whenever you stop working or, you move to an entrepreneurship kind of a role, your cover will cease to exist. And the problem is at that stage, you may not even get a coverage because let's say if you have some grave pre-existing disease, then you may not even get a cover at that point. And then you will be left in the lurch almost. So a lot of people, specifically in this whole last 2 years COVID time frame, they realized this and they came forward looking to buy a health insurance add-on cover or a proper health insurance policy.
Right. No, I think that makes sense. Let's talk a little about government. And I know the National Digital Health Mission is an ambitious program that's trying to replicate in healthcare what Aadhaar and UPI did for financial services. So how do you see various insurers leveraging this digital public good, as it's called, right, a digital infrastructure, to evolve new business models and drive penetration? Because to the point that you made earlier, penetration levels are still less than in like single digit numbers, right, in percentage terms. So how can you see insurers really coming up with new innovative business models, or distributors such as PolicyBazaar expanding the reach based on some of these infrastructures that get created?
So I think that's a good point. And before I comment on that, I think since you mentioned the government, I think it's important to also do credit the regulator, the IRDAI here, because they have done a lot of work, specific to health insurance in the last couple of years, and they've made it. I think in insurance, what really matters is trust, because you're not really selling a product, right? You're just selling trust that in the future I'll pay the claim whenever it's needed. So that way, the regulator has done really, really well. That trust is now increasing and more established than what it used to be earlier. Specific to NDHM and digitization, see, I think it's still very early days, to be very honest. From how insurers are using the NDHM infrastructure, still very early days. People are still figuring out. But I think what has now started to happen, in the health insurance industry, it was traditionally very, very, for the lack of a better word, archaic or very traditional. So what used to happen was, when a customer's claim was to be approved, there are no systems. So it was actually sent through an email, or before that, it was actually sent as a fax. So, and I'm not talking about like 10, 20 years back. I'm talking like 2 years back. So it's still very non-digital, I would say. Things are changing now. Claim processes are now becoming digital, but it's still very early days. I think specific to the NDHM, what's the good news is now, anybody can create a health ID for themselves. You can create a health locker. And through one of our associate companies called Doc Prime, we're also trying to build the same process where a customer can now create a health ID and a health locker. What that does is that once you create that health ID, all your health related documents, be it your medical reports, be it your claim documents, be it any prescriptions, be it any hospitalization files, all of them get linked to your health ID. So you don't really need to carry your files everywhere. Anybody can access it with your approval. All it needs is an OTP authentication, and you can give that access to anybody. So that process has now started. India is, if you look at from a value chain perspective, India is still very, very early into healthcare digitization. There are complexities. There are thousands of doctors in the country. There are, neighborhood doctors. There are large hospitals. The healthcare information systems, that industry is also very, very fragmented. So there are no like few healthcare insurance, HISs which are easy to integrate into. So the process is going to be cumbersome. It's a long journey, to be honest. But the good news is that the journey has now started. So at least on the customer side, people have now started to create these health IDs, and they're starting to link their healthcare records with the health IDs.
Got it. But just staying on that point around digitization, I know that insurers are looking at opportunities to leverage electronic health records, individual data, for more precise underwriting or more individualized, personalized underwriting, so to speak, to the degree possible. But that also comes with challenges such as unpooling of risk or inequitable sharing of risks if you start underwriting for an individual. So how are you looking at health insurance balance the line between, rewarding good behavior? So if I'm running 10 kilometers every day, the likelihood of me falling sick is probably a little lower, or me having a heart ailment is a little lower, while also ensuring that health insurance remains affordable and accessible for all, especially for people with pre-existing conditions or at-risk lifestyles. And you'd mentioned that before as well.
So I think two approaches, and they're now fairly mainstream in the Indian health insurance space. One is, so there are now specific products being developed for youngsters, or the millennials, so to say, where what insurance companies say is that if you come into a health insurance product early, say before 35 or 40 years of age, then you get a certain discount. So what they are basically doing is they are sort of not subsidizing the old. Not subsidizing the elderly by the younger population. What they're saying is the pricing is actually far more discounted for the youngsters if they're coming in the young and healthy. So they're giving that benefit back to the customer, and beyond a certain age, they don't even allow people to come in and buy that specific product. So it's almost, from a product segmentation perspective, there is now this segment which looks at young and healthy, and they want to only onboard young and healthy customers into that product pool itself. So that's one way of doing it, and now that's becoming fairly mainstream. We have seen which only look to onboard the young and healthy people. And if you compare the pricing of these products with the products which onboard everybody, these are much cheaper for obvious reasons, because they're only taking in young and healthy people. That's one. The other way that insurers deal with this is called loading a proposal. So essentially what they do is, if you come in and you have a pre-existing disease, what that means is that the chances of claim are higher. The chances of you giving a loss, a claim to the company will always be higher. So in that scenario, over and above the standard price of health insurance, the insurance company also loads the premium by, let's say, 10%, 20% or 50%, or even more, depending upon how the condition is. So you are always charged a higher price if you're coming in with a pre-existing disease. The objective is again very simple. You are a bad risk for the insurance company, hence you pay more. Somebody who's young and healthy, they don't pay, they pay less. So that sort of balancing is also happening from that perspective. So I think these are the two broad ways in which insurance companies do sort of balance it out, because eventually, see, for an insurance company, what is important is that risks are pooled in the right way. What that means is you don't want all bad customers, but at the same time, if you go after only the young customers, then you don't get scale. So insurance companies are pooling that sort of balancing the act there well.
Correct. No, that's super helpful. So, Amit, from your vantage point, my last question, what are maybe 2 or 3 things you're most excited about for the health insurance industry in the years to come?
I think a few things, right? And as I said, right, India is still very underpenetrated. So there are There are lots of avenues. So, and if you, I think the right way to look at it is also compare with some of the developed markets. So in India, OPD insurance today is still unreal, right? There is no great OPD product that exists out there which a customer can buy. Now that's a huge market. Almost more than half of all the healthcare expenditure that happens on OPD, and nobody really in India is insured for OPD right now. So I think that is one big opportunity. The second one is, again, if you look at open white spaces in the insurance industry, is maternity. Again, it's something that everybody goes through at some point in their life. Do you have a great maternity insurance product? The answer is no. So again, that's something that should really help the industry grow at an overall level. Thirdly, I think at a more macro level, with the kind of awareness that has come in with COVID, people are now making more informed decisions when they buy health insurance. And I think as an online research platform, for us that bodes very well, because what that means is everybody now wants to come online, check what they want to buy, and then they buy what they buy. So I think from that perspective also, being at the center of it really helps. And I think the health insurance space is expected to grow significantly in the in the next 3-4 years, because of the same reasons. Last couple of years, people had challenges. There were budget constraints. People had lost jobs. Businesses weren't doing well. People had made purchases which were very sort of emergency purchases, so they bought what they got. So I think all of that is also now changing. People are now researching. They are migrating to better plans. So all of that is also happening. So I think next 3-4 years there's going to be a lot of action, lot of growth that the health insurance industry is anticipating. So I think, yeah, definitely interesting times.
And exciting times ahead. Amit, thank you so much for making time to speak with us today, and look forward to seeing what's coming next in the sector.
Thank you, Siddharth. It's a pleasure always.